It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Shelly Swanback, President and CEO of TTEC. Shelly joined the company in 2002 as Chief Executive Officer and was named President of TTEC Holdings later that year. With a proven track record driving growth in the digital environment, Shelly is both a market maker and a strong cultural leader with over 30 years of experience in digital transformation, strategic consulting, technology, services, analytics, and M&A. Prior to TTEC, Shelly led Accenture Digital, building it into a global transformation powerhouse with more than $20 billion in annual revenues. As president of product and platform at Western Union, she led the company's digital transformation journey, evolved the business model to a consumer-centric platform, and doubled their digital business to $1 billion. Shelly is currently a board member of Willis Towers Watson and achieved her bachelor's degree in finance and computer information systems from Colorado State University. Shelly Swanback, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. You've been busy, as we said just before we got on the last few months. I think we talked over the summer and I was enjoying beautiful views out my window of France and the Mediterranean. Now I'm looking at the Atlantic and the intercoastal. So always nice to be water. Where does the podcast find you today?
Well, Colorado, my
Nice.
my native home. Yep, always in a actually pretty good weather for fall here in Colorado.
Not
Unfortunately,
turning
not a
cold yet, huh?
well, a little chilly. Not at my mountain house yet, but Colorado native, so you can find me here as often as possible.
Now, are you in the Denver area, a little bit further up in the mountains?
We live in Arvada, kind of near Boulder, and have a place in Crested Butte, Colorado.
Lovely, lovely part of the country. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming in today and having a chance to chat. We always kind of start in the early years. We want to know a little bit about our CEO's foundation. So tell us about where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Absolutely. Well, I did grow up here in Colorado. Um, grew up in a let's just say a middle class family. I have a younger sister, a couple years younger than me, and I guess just grew up in an environment feeling like I could had the opportunity to experiment, try new things. Played a lot of sports. Very very focused at school. I was a student athlete. And for whatever reason, when I was 15 years old, I decided it was time to start working. And
Mm.
at the time, that wasn't allowed. So I wrote an article to the local newspaper complaining that I thought, every 15-year-old was just as qualified to work as a 16-year-old. And so I had a passion for work in my early years
Love
and
that.
definitely a passion for sports.
Yeah, and team building. We'll hear about that more later. I remember our conversation last summer. What did mom and dad do?
My father was a civil engineer at the Denver Water Department. My mom was a stay at home mom part time, but also worked as an accountant and worked out of our home and was probably one of the early adopters to computers back in the day.
Mm.
So I remember having one of those first computers where the monitor and the CPU and everything was one big huge hunk of metal on the desk downstairs.
Love that. What were some of the earliest foundational learnings you think you got from mom and dad during those early years?
I think just definitely a very good base for just values, who I am as a person, doing the right thing all of the time. We were very close as a family, but also just a passion for learning, I would say, a passion for school And we started playing sports when we were pretty little. And I think, you don't realize what that teaches you at the time, but certainly teaches you to adjust to dynamic situations and figure out what your role is on a team versus just as an individual.
Where do you think that work ethic came from, and particularly to inspire you to write that article at 15?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I guess I just felt like my father was, very dedicated to his job, seeing my mom work part-time and also, care for my sister and I. And I guess I just kind of wanted to do something independent. And I think, unfortunately for my mom, I was able to get that first job at McDonald's and liked it so much. I ended up being the assistant manager pretty soon and signed up for opening the store on the weekends. And since I couldn't drive, she had to drive me to work at 4:30 in the morning.
That's probably one of the reasons why that 16-year-old, age is in there, right?
Yeah,
Further out on the
exactly.
road.
Exactly.
What about other early influencers that, inspired you during those younger years? Was there a grandparent, a coach, a teacher that, had an impression on you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. My father's parents had a ranch, so I grew up in the summers on a ranch, and I think that really taught me hard work, like the real definition of hard work, and what it took to earn a dollar and to, really value money because that was a tough living. And then my mother's parents, my grandfather owned his own business. And so I got to see what that looked like in terms of, what came along with that, maybe the country club memberships and some of the social
Perks.
opportunities, but also again the hard work and the real responsibility of taking care of a business and all of your employees.
I think I know the answer to this question, but were you a good student in school?
I was a straight A student, yes.
I thought that was coming. I thought that was coming. Was that, kind of self-motivated? I remember
Yes.
my dad telling me, son, he was an educator, a PhD, and was actually a principal at a elementary private public school. But son, treat every good grade as a paycheck. And I was like, I've never forgotten that. My kids say, Dad, you've told me that so many times. Quit that story.
Interesting. It was self-motivated, and my parents never pressured us for our
Hmm.
grades. I do remember um, that we'd always get to go out for a Dairy Queen ice cream cone to celebrate good grades, but I didn't get paid for them or anything like that, like some others. But it was always definitely self-motivated.
And you mentioned sports was one of your main outside activities.
Hmm.
And I'd like to get into that in a minute because I know it had a very formative part of your career. But what else? Was there music, theater, debate? What other kinds of things were you involved with
Yeah,
outside of
I
school?
was in the jazz band. I played the saxophone.
Nice.
And I was in student government, and so those definitely played a role. As I got into high school and played sports more seriously and competitively, I had to choose. So I chose sports versus all those other things. But they definitely, played a role in, I guess, me exploring life and learning along the way as well.
What were the first sports you got involved with as a kid and that evolved into high school?
Yeah, soccer was my first, and then basketball. Really liked softball. That was probably one of my better sports. Played some volleyball. When I was in junior high, played all those sports. So year round was playing at least one, if not two sports along the way. And had the high school track coach ask me to try out for track and be on the team in junior high. And I hated track. I hated running. I hated jumping. I hated all of that. But somehow he convinced me that I needed to be on the track team. So that was a short stint. So I'd say the main sports were soccer and softball and basketball, and I played those through high school.
Nice. And you went on to play college ball as well.
I actually didn't. I could have, but I chose not to. I decided I really wanted to focus on school, and so
Yeah.
I went to Colorado State University and decided to get a double major. And at the time, I was looking at finance and math. I ended up discovering computer programming along the way, and so changed my major and graduated with a computer information systems and finance degree.
Now you mentioned entrepreneurial things. I think, as you said, one of your grandparents had
Hmm.
his own business or her own business. What
Hmm.
were the kind of things that you did as an entrepreneur as a kid?
Oh goodness. Um, I think just well, I would say don't know if it's entrepreneurial, but what I would just say is, I started early, as I said, when I was working at McDonald's, and very quickly ended up being the assistant manager, and then pretty soon after realized that Well, that was interesting. I would really wanted to do something different, and part of what I wanted to do is not just make money at a job, but have some other benefits. And so, part of what I had to do is help pay for my own clothing budget. And so I decided I was going to work at a clothing store.
Nice.
So that helped me not just through college, but definitely helped me as I was graduating college and finding my first job and realizing, what it costs to start a business wardrobe and that sort of thing. So I guess I was always looking for a job that had something more than just money. In fact, when I was in college, I had three jobs for different reasons to get different experience and sort of different perks. And so maybe not entrepreneurial in terms of starting my own business, but let's just say finding things that can benefit me in multiple ways.
Were you a saver?
Absolutely. In fact, my mother used to one of her favorite memories is looking in my dresser drawer after I had moved out of the house and I had saved all these birthday cards and in fact had forgotten the fact that all the birthday money was still
Oh.
in them.
Oh, that was a nice surprise, right?
Yeah.
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 So you went to CSU. Was it kind of a foregone conclusion? Did you said mom and dad didn't push you a lot, but did they expect you to go to college?
I think they did expect me to go to college. That was just never part of the conversation because I
Yeah.
expected me to go to
Right.
college.
Right. You're self-driven.
So I'd say, yeah, foregone conclusion going to college. Where was definitely a choice. We didn't have the money for me to consider out of state
Right.
um, options. So I toured all the in-state colleges and did everything I could to get as many scholarships. I remember $75 scholarships, $150 scholarships. I was like
Wow.
on the scholarship roadshow, picking up help everywhere I could, and ended up at CSU, which turned out to be a great place for me because it's a very hardworking sort of has a real work ethic to it culturally. So that was a great fit.
Awesome. And you said you changed majors a little bit, but landed
hmm
eventually on business.
Yeah, so I ended up with computer information systems and also a degree in finance, and that was a bit of an accident. I just sort of fell in love with the computer programming and technology when one of my freshman classes, and so decided that was going to be a lot more interesting than a math degree.
And did you work while you went to school as well? Was that kind of expected as well, along with the scholarships you received?
Yeah, I did. I worked at the computer lab.
Yeah.
Kept working at the clothing store. I ended up being a teaching assistant for one of the business writing professors, and yeah, so three jobs all at once was a little bit much in the honors program with pursuing two degrees at the same time. But I guess one of the things that I learned early on was to how to manage my time and just appreciated, being able to do a lot of things at the same time.
Yeah, awesome. And then you did something which a lot of people don't really do, which is go take a first job and pretty much stay there for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
28 years.
So Accenture, tell us about, kind of the choices around graduation and why you chose them as your first employer.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they were my lowest salary job offer, so I suppose that's not always the easiest choice to make.
Right.
But somehow felt like I fit from the very beginning, and
Mm,
I think the thing for me was I definitely enjoyed the people I met, but I just liked the idea of consulting and liked the idea of this opportunity to learn new things and this opportunity to work at different clients, and almost felt like to me like I could have multiple careers but all with the same employer. And so it just felt like a good fit for me. And I joined, and everybody always asked me, did I always strive to be a partner? And my answer is I always assumed I would be one, right? I just
hmm
started the job and did good work and had lots of great client opportunities, and it was kind of always, I guess an expectation, if you want to say that. I just sort of an assumption that, yeah, I'd end up being a partner someday.
And did you start with leadership responsibilities pretty early on? When did you start managing people?
I did 9 months in.
Wow.
I was on a 300 person custom system project to create a telephone billing system for a company out in California. And the technology came pretty easy to me because of my college. And so, yeah, my first 9 months in, they asked me to actually be the supervisor of the team I was on. And so
Nice.
that was a real quick lesson in leadership, particularly when you go from being a colleague and a peer to now their boss. And I think that was very formative for me, I would say, in my leadership um, style and abilities to be able to navigate a situation where you were, I'm the boss of the people that I was just their peers.
Right. And most of them about the same age, perhaps even some that were older than you.
Yeah, yeah, some older, mostly the same age at the time, but definitely some, actually some people that had been with Accenture longer than I had, and so that was probably, that was part of my challenge early on, but and where I learned to just be a very humble, I'd say
Mm.
collaborative sort of servant leader, and that has served me very well over the years.
Yeah, yeah. Did that come naturally to you, kind of starting that right away? Because I can imagine, particularly with those that had been at Accenture a while, might have been a little feathers a little ruffled, thinking maybe they should have had your job.
I think it was pretty natural for me, and it was okay natural for the team, just
Mm,
because, as I said, the technology had came pretty easy for me, and so while I was my first assignment was a 100-page structure chart, and the rest of my teammates were getting one-page data programs, and so I was sort of helping them all along the way, anyways.
mm.
So I think that was part of why I was asked to take over the team, is because um, I was sort of already acting as a player coach, and so it came pretty natural.
Did you achieve partner in the time frame that you expected to?
1 year late, darn it. Um,
Oh goodness, that must have been a motivator.
that was a tough one. Maybe
Yeah.
a story for another day. But I would say, yes. And one thing I learned along the way is there were some assignments I really didn't want to do along the way because I thought they were setting me back. And
Mm.
once you get through them and you look back, you realize actually no, they didn't set me back. In fact, they might have helped propel me forward, because I was, there were some assignments where I thought I was sort of past them, sort of beyond that, and was able to go into the situation and do something more that was being asked of me. And then, it turns out sometimes those things can accelerate your career.
Did they have you specialize in any particular, project function work or sector or industry, or did you get real good smattering across all of Accenture's client base?
I got a real smattering. I would say one of the stress points for me at one point in my career was I was not as specialized. And at the
Mm.
time, specialized skills was, kind of the thing. Everybody was, are you a supply chain expert? Are you a,
Right.
finance expert? Or are you a real technology expert? Or are you change management expert? And I wasn't a functional expert in it. And if that was stressful for me at one point. But what I learned was what I there was good demand for those utility players, and
Yeah.
just good leaders. And that's really how I made my career.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of mentors along the way? Was Accenture an environment where that was something that people did, and looked up to folks that maybe were partners ahead of you, or maybe
Hmm.
had been there a longer period of time that kind of helped you along?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely an environment where mentorship was important. And I would say I always sort of I didn't necessarily have one mentor that stands out for my career, but I always sort of looked at it as all of those folks I was working with, just really thinking about, what were those leadership characteristics I wanted to emulate, and what were the ones that I just definitely never wanted to emulate, didn't want to be
Yeah.
like, right? I was always sort of, I guess, just very observant about that. And so I used those people as mentors too, just to learn about what was making them successful. And of course, had a lot of colleagues. Some of my colleagues were my best mentors because we did a lot of hard things at Accenture, right? Lots of hard projects, hard client situations. I had a few clients actually that were mentors for me as
Mm.
well along the way.
Tell us about some of those situations without mentioning names, where you
Yeah.
maybe observed behavior and said, "Wow, I'm never going to do that," or "Well, I can see what happened with that situation," and kind of made a registered note on, either it was managing people, or perhaps managing clients on the outside, because you spent a lot of time with clients over the years.
Yeah, I did. Probably the most stressful project in my career actually was probably about 5 years into Accenture, and we were working with a client that was actually launching a new business, and we were helping set up their financial systems. And the CFO and the CIO just absolutely did not like each other, and it created real
Within the
stress
client,
in
within the
within the
client, they did.
client, real
Wow.
stress in their client organization. And somehow I ended up being the only person allowed in the CFO's office and also the CIO's office. And so it's sort of, I didn't want to emulate either one of them, and I was a little bit of the peacekeeper, if you will,
Peacemaker,
and
right?
trying to navigate getting their business launched. And fact, one of them committed suicide
Oh, goodness.
during the
Oh,
project. And so that was definitely a lesson in letting things and egos just be taken way too seriously.
yeah, yeah. We talked earlier about your, team sports. And I remember in our
Mm,
conversation over the summer how much formative that's been.
hmm
If you went back during your years at Accenture, and we're going to get to TTEC in a minute, but if you look over your years at Accenture, where would you say you kind of drew the most, and what were those learnings from, the team sports you played back in high school?
hmm Yeah. I guess I'd say a couple things. First of all, I guess just the discipline, in playing team sports. I think that's always a good foundation, a good baseline. I was not the most natural athlete. So I wasn't naturally the best individual contributor on any of those sports on any team I played on. I was most often the team captain, but it wasn't because, I was the best softball player or the fastest soccer player and the like. What I learned through all of that is leadership, how to bring a team together, how to motivate a team, how to navigate that on the field and off the field, if you will. But probably the best thing I learned is figuring out how I could contribute to make the team successful. It wasn't
Mm,
about my individual performance, it was about what the team needed me to do in that moment, in that game, off the field. And that, I think at the time, I don't think I was as conscious of what I was doing, but I think that has probably served me the very best in my
yeah,
career.
yeah, awesome. So 28 years at Accenture, that's
Mhm.
a career for most people,
Yeah,
Shelly. And I'm sure you probably had opportunities to leave. There were guys like me,
of
recruiters calling you
course.
from time to time,
Yeah.
trying to attract you here and there. You said no for a long period of time. You didn't go directly to TTEC. I know you spent a couple of years
Right.
at Western Union. Tell us about that transition, kind of the thought process behind, gosh, I built my whole career here. I'm a partner. I've
Yeah.
done amazing
Mhm.
things. Clients love me. I've been the
Mhm.
peacemaker. How did you kind of put together this is the right time to move on?
Well, it was all by accident. So it wasn't I hadn't planned it. We were at a little bit of an inflection point at Accenture. New CEO, was helping her with what the new growth strategy for Accenture would be, and I had been leading a business that we had started called Accenture Digital, and so there were going to be some changes, and it was going to be a change, for me personally in terms of what I would do at Accenture. And long story short, called a colleague I had worked with, and just for some outside advice, and an opportunity came up, and externally, and I realized that maybe it was time for me to, if I was going to make a pivot and wanted to be able to serve on public company boards, that was not something you could do at Accenture.
Right.
And just decided, maybe it was the opportunity to take a new challenge and put all that great digital transformation and everything I learned building Accenture Digital to work at a company that was local here for me in Colorado. And so that was a big piece of it, is also just being able to have a team day to day, have an office, have a team that you could work with day to day. At Accenture, we're on the road all the time, working quite virtually and with global teams. And so it was just a little bit of happenstance and circumstance, versus anything that was planned.
The fact that Western Union's based in Colorado had a lot
Correct.
of
Yeah.
it,
And
though.
so was
Yeah.
TTEC. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Terrific. And you spent a couple of years there before moving to TTEC, and
hmm
a little bit of a different career trajectory. Again, a couple of years versus the
hmm
28, 30. Was
hmm
it the corner office that attracted you? Was it the business? What was it about TTEC
Yeah. A little
that?
bit of both.
Hmm,
Definitely a little bit of both. I spent a lot of time at Accenture, when we were building Accenture Digital in the whole customer experience space, and that's the space that TTEC's in. So I find that pretty interesting, really across industries, and just an opportunity, as you said, the corner office, but and in a services industry, which is obviously where I spent my majority of my career, the 28 years at Accenture. So we our services are different, so it's not exactly the same thing, but
but you're kind of back into
probably,
consulting,
yeah,
right? I
kind
mean,
of
it's
back
the
into
yeah,
consulting.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that was pretty natural for me. And again, global company, lots of juicy transformation challenges, chance to build a team, be part of a business that's been around for 40 years, be part of the evolution of that. So that was all part of what attracted me here.
Now, are the founders still around, or are they
Yeah,
still
Ken
influencing the
Tuckman's still
company?
around. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely playing and
And
very involved in the business.
now, was he CEO before you came in, or there had been others prior to his relinquishing that role, or if he ever had it?
Yeah. No, no, he is, and without getting into too complicated here, we have two business units inside of TTEC, and so Ken is still the CEO of the overall business. I'm the
Okay.
president of the overall business and the CEO of our biggest business segment. So regardless, it's a partnership, and it's about moving
Yeah.
the business forward. And there's nobody more passionate than him about this whole CX space.
Love it. So, thinking about leadership, and if you think
Mm,
back to the days of working at McDonald's, and then
hmm
obviously those first project, work that you had at Accenture, how would you describe your leadership's evolution over that period of time?
um, yeah, it's a great
Or has it been
question. I
consistent?
think
Are
I think
you
the
pretty much
things
the
that
same
have,
manager with
yeah,
that?
I think the things that are consistent, a couple of things are consistent, which is my upbringing. I think a combination of my parents and my grandparents. I've sort of always had this mentality of I got to earn my keep every day.
Mm,
And so that's been consistent from the time I started at McDonald's at 15 to now. Every day I wake up feeling like I work for the team as much or more than they work for me. And what am I going to do to make a difference and make an impact and earn my keep today? So I think that probably is, certainly been consistent. I think what I've learned along the way, particularly as lead bigger, global, complex organizations, is a lot around just this whole player coach mentality.
mm,
You can't be on the field doing the work for the team all the time. Sometimes you got to sit back and just let the team do it, even if they're struggling a little bit. And so over the years, you learn when it's time to step in, when it's time to just sit back. You learn what it takes to kind of activate change across an organization, particularly a global one. And I think what I've gotten really passionate about, certainly since I started when we were building Accenture Digital, is just this idea of a diverse team. And I don't just mean diverse in terms of how we think about it, gender diversity, yeah, ethnic diversity, et cetera, but really diversity in terms of backgrounds,
skill
diversity in
sets.
terms
Yeah,
of approaches, and
yeah,
really passionate about how do you build a team and a culture where everybody can bring their best strengths and learn how to work together. And so I think that's probably where I've grown the most as a leader, and probably where one of my, everybody has a super strength. That's probably one of mine.
mm, yeah, awesome. 22nd, 21st century CEOs have a little bit of a different workforce than 20th century
Mm-hmm.
CEOs, and I've kind of bridged the gap in my recruiting and my operational career. And I think it's quite common these days where you see a lot of CEOs having their answers questioned rather than their questions answered.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if you're encountering that. Do you find that,
Mm-hmm.
with the younger workforce, there's, folks that perhaps speak up a little bit more than we did when
Mm-hmm.
we were growing up
Mm-hmm.
in organizations like Accenture or
Mm-hmm.
Procter and Gamble or Disney?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I mean, what I've I guess what I've discovered, or what I like to do is, rather than is to give them opportunities to do exactly that. Like, give them forums to have direct conversations with
Mm,
me at all levels, open office hours, you can pick your way of doing it. I find that then ends up being a much more productive discussion than just having people, question the strategy of the company, or, as you
right.
said, your answers questioned. So I think, and I find that actually to be quite a learning experience, to get a pulse on what's going on in the organization and what's top of mind, and let some of those great ideas bubble up across the organization.
Yeah. You mentioned company culture, and that's so
Mhm.
important. And, you and
Mhm.
I spoke about this, that, in recruiting, that's probably the single biggest thing, internally or externally, whether
Mhm.
you're working as a recruiter like myself or internally
Mhm.
interviewing, is really having a good handle on your culture and being able to recruit against that.
Mhm.
Do you see that evolving in the 40 years at TTEC? And, are you kind of in a shift where, maybe you have to modify that a little bit, or are you kind of more status quo with regards to how TTEC's culture has evolved over these last 4 decades?
Definitely not status quo. I mean, I think this is a big part of the transformation we have underway, and it's all just driven by I think the environment that we all live in, which is change is a constant, right? You just can't be done with change. And so, how do you create a culture that's always learning and that it's good at change? I
Yeah.
often, say if I mean that's a part of our biggest job as leaders is to create a company that's good at change because it's not one and done, it's constant change. A good at learning, okay, good at innovation. As I say, innovation and change is messy, so sometimes you just got to teach people to embrace the mess.
Mm.
As a leader, sometimes it gets a little too messy, so sometimes you got to jump in and sort out the mess.
Right. Right.
But sometimes creating a little chaos and a little mess in the organization is actually what brings the change.
Yeah. Yeah. That generates two interesting questions. And the first one on culture, you're 20 countries, I believe, and how
Yep.
many how many employees?
Hmm.
40, 50,000, I think. And
60,000, right?
60,000. Fabulous. And if you think about, culture again in terms of communicating that across,
Hmm.
the various countries and
Hmm.
the various offices, how do you do that in today's world? Do you have regular town halls? Do you have newsletters? Is there
Hmm.
ways that you direct your direct reports with regards to that cultural communication so
Hmm.
people kind of know, what's evolving and what's changing?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above approach. I mean, part of it
Mm.
is actually just being out in the field with the teams and clients. There's probably nothing more powerful than that, right? I was in the Philippines a couple of weeks ago and, you know, dancing with the team, serving them pancakes, just being part of that. That's a lot of what builds culture and being very engaged. I find, yeah, of course, you can send emails and things. I find those not to be that helpful. I prefer videos,
Mm.
um, just because I think it's just more engaging for everybody. And then just those regular town halls, those regular open office hours, and I think, I don't know. I think one thing that kills culture is PowerPoint. So
Mm.
I don't like to have a lot of presentations. I like to have them be a little bit more open-ended, sort of natural discussions versus, always presenting to everybody or
Yeah.
I'm talking at them, if you will.
Right, right. My second question along that is you talk about issues and CEOs.
Hmm.
The buck stops in the corner office. Let's face it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, those issues come up. You have to kind of decide how to, zoom in or zoom out. How do you kind
Hmm.
of make that call? Particularly when you see an issue, maybe it's not being brought to you, maybe it is. When is the
Hmm.
time to kind of micromanage and get involved, or kind of stay out of the way and provide the coaching that others need to, get the job done or get the issue resolved?
Hmm. I mean, I guess a couple things come to mind. I think if it's a particular issue, I guess the question is what's the impact of getting it
Yeah.
wrong, right? Or letting it take a little bit more time to solve if you don't jump in. Like, is it material? Is it meaningful? Is it sort of a one-time isolated issue, or is it something more systemic? Obviously, more systemic, you're probably more likely to jump in. I also think just in terms of decisions, lots of people talk about one-way doors and two-way doors, right? If it's a one-way door and it's a big decision, it's going to be hard to come back, then obviously getting more involved is important. Sometimes if it's a two-way door and you just have to let the team experiment a little bit. And I do think lots of organizations struggle with this today. They want to be change oriented, they want to be more innovation oriented, but all the cultural norms, all the systems, all the processes, all the performance metrics, they don't they don't encourage that because people are afraid that if it doesn't work out, they're going to get stuck
Right.
with the accountability. And I think that's one of the hardest things as a leader in terms of creating the right balance there. You don't take, of course, you want to take your risks wisely, but
Right.
you have to have an organization that feels like they can experiment and learn.
And make mistakes. We
And
learn
make
we learn
mistakes is
that way.
part of
Yeah,
experimenting and learning,
yeah,
right? And I
yeah.
think, I'm probably not, certainly not perfect at this, and probably don't do it as often as I would even like to. But I certainly try and make a habit of just. I think there's a language around learning when something comes up and something goes wrong is to solve the situation, but make sure in the same moment you're stepping back and asking the team, what can we learn from this? And based on what we've learned from this, what are we going to do differently next time? And I think that in itself helps set up a bit more of a learning culture versus a blaming culture.
Very important. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire at TTEC, Shelly?
Certainly, what they bring from an expertise or experience perspective is important, but I guess for me, it's a bit more around absolutely cultural fit. What are they, what are they motivated by, right?
Mm,
What's their motivation? Are they all in, right? Do they bring something different to the team that's, different than everybody else that's important to that sort of, real diverse team, diverse thinking? And definitely somebody who's humble
mm.
and willing to learn.
So my next question, Shelly, is you interview a lot of folks.
Hmm.
Frankly, by the time you see them, they've been vetted, and you've had a lot of opportunities to have those folks gone through a variety of different interviews before they've seen them. Do you have kind of a favorite interview question or a way in which kind of separate the wheat from the chaff for the folks, either in that
Hmm.
cultural side of things that you're looking for?
Hmm. Yeah, I think, why are you interested in this opportunity?
Hmm.
Right? What what's the superpower you think you bring to the table? What motivates you, and what's your pet peeve?
Hmm. Good
Just
ones.
to get a sense, less around, as you said, their experience is well vetted, but it's important to understand, what kind of culture people want to fit into, how they're motivated, why they want the opportunity. Do they see it as a rung on the career ladder? Do they see it as an opportunity they want to be in for a while? Do they see it as an opportunity where they want to learn? Is it the people? I think it's just important to understand their underlying motivations, and
Motivations.
if there's
Yeah.
really a good fit.
Yeah. Awesome. Shelly, you've been very, very generous with your time. Thank you so much for that. We always
Mm.
have one last question, though, we ask all our CEO guests, and that's what kind of career and life advice would you give someone who's got their eyes on their own corner office someday?
Oh goodness. I think I guess first of all would be to go for it, and secondly would be to, be patient.
Yeah,
Not every single opportunity along the way feels like it's necessarily, a rung on the old ladder, but every opportunity presents opportunity in and of itself. And if you figure out how to leverage the strengths you have and to learn something new at the same time, my experience is every one of those opportunities at Accenture led to something better. At the time, I might not have had the confidence that was going to be the case, but looking back, it was absolutely the case 100% of the time.
that's fantastic. Shelly Swanback, President and CEO of TTEC, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.